Well, greetings. I know it's a little bit later than I've been doing hockey videos lately, but this is one that I've wanted to do, and I figured, I'll do it tonight. Post it tonight. Artemi Panarin. So when we talk about players who probably got hurt by this shutdown, I look at Panarin and say, yep. And the Rangers in general is a team that gets hurt by it because they had momentum. They looked really good. The good news is, if you're a Rangers fan, Shesterkin's going to be there for a while. Looks like Georgiev's going to be there for a while as well, meaning a pretty good tandem. And Artemi Panarin will definitely be there for a while. And he had quite the coming out party this year for the New York Rangers. The interesting thing is that at 23 years of age, he was a coveted KHL free agent. And teams knew they could sign him for cheap, and apparently over half the league was in on him. There were rumors about Pittsburgh and what the Pens might have wanted to do to get him, and teams may not have been willing to give him the kind of contract Chicago did. Chicago, in the end, signs them to an incredible deal, right? 2 years, a total of $1.625 million. That is total. And so they had a contract with him that if he failed to make the Blackhawks, he didn't go to Rockford, he would go home. And some teams won't make that deal. And some fans don't like it when teams make that deal either. There's a very staunch belief that you earn your spot in the NHL. And if you haven't played in North America, you shouldn't just automatically get a one-way contract. You shouldn't automatically get an out clause either to go home. I understand it, though. I do. I don't have a problem with it. You look at right now, Jesse Puljujarvi in Edmonton goes home to play in Europe, and I think that benefits him. I think it's better than him playing another year in Edmonton and being frustrated. I think it's a much better situation. So I understand the returning to Europe. With Vancouver just down the street, Trampkin is an example of a guy who went home. I don't know that it necessarily benefited him either. I think, you look at where Trampkin's career is right now. That's a whole other discussion we can have another time. But in the case of Panarin, it works. So, going through these guys' names here, there are players that it doesn't work and players that it does. There's some risk involved. Now, the risk is he's 5'11", 170 pounds, and that's what scared some teams off of him initially. So this is how you end up being a free agent, and you have to keep getting better and better, and then NHL teams say, okay, now we'll take a shot at him. So I think this was his third year in the KHL, and his stats just kept getting better. And so at 23 years of age, he signs this contract with the Hawks. And right out of the gate, 2015-2016, scores 77 points, wins the Calder Trophy, which leads to some criticism. And I see this criticism here and there where a player who is 23 gets this in this case, and he's up against players who are 22. I've seen instances recently where you'll see a player who's up for Rookie of the Year, and they'll say, well, yeah, but look what he's doing. But he's 21, and the other guy's 19. So the guy who's 19 deserves some more credit because he's 2 years younger. The way that it's set up with the Calder, with young players should be the ones getting it, is that way because of Sergei Makarov. When Makarov came over and won the Calder for Calgary, everybody NHL related went, okay, timeout, that shouldn't have happened. What happened here? A guy who's in his 30s shouldn't be Rookie of the Year. The weird thing is, he's still in his first year. He's still technically a rookie. Makarov being Rookie of the Year was just an example of, yeah, you can be the best player in your first year. I don't know. I understand why the rule exists where if you're 27 or older, you don't qualify, but I still find it odd. So right now he's 28 years of age. He's a New York Ranger, and we all know he's in the midst of an amazing season. He gets here via the first 2 years playing in Chicago. December 28th of 2016, he signs a 2-year, $12 million contract. Now, this contract is why he ends up in Columbus. They know he's going to ask for a lot more money. So he goes, I'm not going to get into the whole trade because this isn't really a career video. This is more about where he's at right now. But he does get traded. They want some cap certainty, and they know they're not going to have it with Panarin. He's going to ask for a whole lot more money. So he plays a couple of years in Columbus and plays better. So he plays well in Chicago. Not going to say he didn't. 77 and 74 points, respectively. And then 82 and 87 points in the 2 years in Columbus. And, of course, last year in Columbus, there was a lot of talk about, hey, Panarin's going to want out, and whether or not Columbus could find a way to hold on to him. And the whole way along, the rumor was no, that he wasn't going to stay in Columbus. So July 1st of this past year, 2019, he signs a 7-year, $81.5 million contract that'll run through 2026. I, along with others, looked at that contract and said, wow, that's a lot of money. That's about $12 million a year for Panarin, who up until this season didn't really strike me as like an 11, $12 million a year player. I didn't see anything in his first 4 years. Yeah, he's trending up, but at the same time, right now he's 28. He's 27 when he signs this contract, and I'm thinking, this is probably as good as it's going to get. 87 points, 27 years of age, probably about as good as it's going to get. Not only that, but he goes to the New York Rangers, who it looks like are still going through a retool, and that could negatively impact his numbers as well. We don't know who his line mates are going to be. We don't know how it's going to go. Boy, howdy, was I wrong. So 69 games played this season, and we still don't know what's going to happen with the other games, so I'm not going to make any assumptions. A lot of people do. I don't. Despite the news from the future, I don't know the future. Not as well as people think. 32 goals, 63 assists, 95 points. So criminally, he doesn't hit 100 points this year. And I say criminally because, honestly, if there's a season that deserves to be in the triple digits, it's this one. If there's a guy who deserves 70 assists this year, it's Panarin. Panarin's been absolutely fantastic. Now, if you're big on the whole secondary assists aren't as important as primary, you can find a hole in that he, last time I looked, led the league in secondary assists. I don't think that secondary assists are a big deal. I don't think it's really all that important, but you will find people who, when we look at next year, are going to say he'll have a hard time replicating this because of the amount of secondary assists that he had, because they weren't primary. That is the only thing that I look at in his numbers and say, this is something somebody else is going to point out. I'm not going to. Do I think he'll hit 100 next year? I don't really know, because I didn't think he'd hit 100 this year. So he's played 391 games. That's notable because a guy who's 5'11", 170 pounds, scouts and GMs are going to kind of shy away from, with the idea of, hey, the physical rigors of the NHL may take their toll. This is a guy who may not play more than 60, 65 games in a year. And yet, here he is. 391 games played, and he's missed very, very few in his career thus far. 148 goals, 267 assists, 415 points. Very respectable totals. Now, because he comes over at age 23, he's probably got another 5 years of prime scoring left. And he could end up being a guy who ends up around 1,000 points. He could be a guy who ends up being Hall of Famer. And if he keeps playing the way he did in year one with the New York Rangers, yeah, absolutely. He's on his way, and signing with the Rangers is the smartest thing that he's done. It is curious because I remember when he signed that contract in 2015, there was no telling what we were going to get. Think of Gusev. Okay, Gusev was really, really hyped up for years. First for Tampa, who held the rights, and then for Vegas when they had the rights. And then he goes to New Jersey, and it's like, hey, this could be big. And then Gusev has had a good year. He's had some good stats. But has he been what he was hyped up to be? No. And so there was some concern with Panarin. The difference is, of course, they paid a lot to get Gusev into New Jersey this year. Chicago got away with signing him for barely anything. And he made the team out of training camp, so the whole KHL threat never had to be followed through on. And it is interesting because it shows on some level the challenge Canadian teams have. There were rumored to be at least 3 Canadian teams that were interested in him before he came over. Canadian teams do suffer when it comes to the offers that they can make to players who are free agents. I think we're going to see that even more so right now. Because as things stand right now, the Canadian dollar is really low. So that's going to make things difficult for Canadian teams depending on what happens with the economy from here. But even before that, back in 2015, it's understandable that Panarin would look at the American market and say, hey, this is a better place for me to go. A nice story, too, out of Chicago with this was that they brought in Artem Anisimov. They also brought over his teammate, Tikhonov, and they made sure that he had Russians with him, and he was living with a Russian couple when he came over that first year in order to be better acclimated and to have people around that could help him navigate becoming American and getting through the whole fact that he didn't really know English. So there are some really good stories about how Chicago treated him when he came over. Good stories about how Columbus played really well when he was there. And now the story just seems to keep getting better. Him in the Big Apple has been a huge success. And we'll see. We'll see whether or not the New York Rangers get back to Stanley Cup glory in the 2021 season and beyond. And maybe he ends up leading them 4 rounds. Maybe that ends up happening. Panarin's the best superstar player they've had in quite a while. But we'll see. We'll see if this is 1 year, if next year he returns down to the 82-point mark, 84 or 85-point mark, which is nothing shabby in today's NHL, or if 100 points is now going to be the standard. So there you go. Artemi Panarin, an interesting guy to look over and discuss. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And I guess the big question I have is this a career year that he won't be able to match? Or is this the new reality? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. Especially right now, it means a ton. I'll talk to you again soon.